Just wanted to welcome everybody to our AT Chatter this evening, our second in the series of six, right? Yeah, six of myth busting assistive technology devices and services, where we're taking a look at the document from the Department of Education. I'm Sharon Redman. I am an assistive technology specialist and a special education teacher. And we have Kristen Leslie here with us as well, our wonderful director, which we could not live without. So we're going to get to it today. For those of you that weren't with us last week, that we're kind of switching these things up. We're not going through them in the chronological order in which they're presented, which is awesome. However, we really wanted to focus and have some really deep discussions around kind of these key concepts. Today is about AT background knowledge, and we're going to be focusing on 9, 12, 13, and 14. We have our learning objectives there, and you'll have access to that. So we have session 2, the myths and facts, where we're really kind of going to focus around that AT background knowledge. And so here are those 4 myths that we're going to be focusing on: 9, 12, 13, and 14. So we're looking at, does AT always involve electronic devices? Does it always need to be high tech? Does AT devices and services that work for one child, like it'll work for all children? Like, we're going to be looking at that. We'll have a group looking at that. Accessible technology and assistive technology, are they the same thing? We're going to have a discussion about that. And AT, UDL, Universal Design of Learning, and Accessible Educational Materials, AEMs, are also those the same things? So kind of picking these apart and really kind of diving into having our background knowledge. And why do we need to do that? This is also accessible for you guys. We'll give you access in the links. But we're looking at that because we're coming back to, with this AT Chatter, is kind of our foundational kind of piece that we're talking about. We're all within schools, and we really want to be focusing on and building those strength-based IEPs and having assistive technology in mind. So we're, as you're going through tonight, kind of, think about those IEPs and where we're looking at those considerations and how this background knowledge helps build your team and strengthen that IEP, especially when you're looking at those considerations and putting things in accommodations, oh gosh, all the pieces of the IEP. It'll come up with the rest of them as we go through. So assistive technology and how it relates to universal design of learning, IT, and then AEMs, right? And so I kind of like this slide as, when does a universal design tool, right, such as our phone, such as speech to text, when does that that works for a good majority of our population, when does that become an assistive technology tool, right? When do we make that becomes AT? When does something like your common IT, your computer, your headphones, tools in the environment, low-tech tools, when do those that, again, pretty common in our day and age, right? Everybody has a computer. When does that become assistive technology? And then also educational accessible materials. So we want things to be accessible for all and access. So when do those materials and when do we put them in as an AT piece, as a low-tech AT piece? So just some considerations to think about. And it's not by chance that assistive technology is not within this circle. So as you're kind of thinking about that.
So here we have listed the myths that Sharon just mentioned, the 4 that we're talking about today, and then we just are going for what we did last time, kind of review it, look at the explanation of it, and then discuss it with some guiding questions we have for each myth.
So myth 9 of building our foundational knowledge here is AT always involves an electronic device and is always high tech. So this is the myth, right? This is not the truth. This is the myth. But the fact of this actually is that many assistive technology devices and tools, right? They're going to be computer based. They're going to be that high tech. But then there's also going to be those low tech items like visual schedules and calendars and binder clips, squishy balls. I'd love to have a good talk about that, why that would be assistive technology. Stickers may also be considered assistive technology. So again, kind of think back at that slide that I showed as to what makes, right, a low tech, high tech item, um, an assistive technology tool or not.
Yeah,
Do you
and
want?
they mentioned the IRIS Center as a
Mm,
great technical assistance center that's funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs.
mhm.
And they have developed and disseminate free online resources that are evidence-based instructional and behavioral practices to support educators of all students. So particularly those struggling learners and students with disabilities. So this gives us a great resource to learn more about the low tech, mid tech, and high tech, to dive into that. It could be PD for your group or your building.
I was just
And
about to say that
go
I've
ahead.
used the Iris materials actually as PD. So when for my staff, my paraeducator staff, when I'm talking with my special education directors, principals, giving them and building their knowledge up about this of what is. So when I describe, okay, like we're going to talk about low tech stuff today, mid tech, high tech. So they have some foundational knowledge of what that looks like. And that Iris Center does a really nice job with those modules of going through and giving examples. So I encourage you to go through them.
I feel like this myth is personally aimed at me.
Oh no, Casey, why would you say
Oh,
that?
because I have to draw the line for the adaptive inclusive tech, like what constitutes, if it's coming out of the ed tech office, right? And people are asking on my inclusive adaptive, tech grant. So like, if they're asking for wiggle chairs, I'm like, we're an ed tech grant. It should be something that's, tech, right? Like there should be batteries or like what I mean, like I as much as I would love to say yeah that's definitely inclusive software or tools, it doesn't fit the scope of it coming out of the educational technology office, right? So like where is that line do I draw between like okay, well, a smart timer has batteries, is that considered tech? Like versus, something like, Proloquo or, an AAC tablet or like communication boards. I mean, I've approved communication boards, but I was like, sort of a little bit of a squish. Can you get digital signage ones? Like, ones that you can just update with like an app, like versus like, ones that, well, we just want giant poster boards for, out in the playground.
So are you IT tech or are you
We're
what
ed
are
tech, so we are sort of everything when it comes to like, so my grants in the past when I had lots of money were a little bit more vague, right? Like UDL, does this fall under UDL and UDL support? I had a lot, with $9 million, I had a lot more wiggle room. With like $600,000, and it's coming out, as adaptive and inclusive technology. I had to like sort of fine tune it to be more. Well, would this be supported? Something that could be helped supported by your IT or ed tech department, right? Or your so that helped kind of narrow it down a little bit.
Mm.
So, but on the other hand, like where's that line of like, does it have to have a software license? Does it have to have a tool? Like, you know, um, so that's part of my struggle on what I approve and what I don't is like, well, where's that line between does electronic alone constitute being tech, right? Like a visual timer is electric technology, right? But is it considered educational technology?
Is adaptive tech, assistive tech, and is no tech, low tech assistive tech?
When I heard you talking, Casey, what kind of caught my attention was that this verbiage, right? And that is being used of low tech, mid tech, high tech doesn't help you. It confuses your issue a little bit, right? And so when, I have the Iris Center pulled up, and when we're talking about, their low tech, their definition is devices that are readily available, inexpensive, and typically do not require batteries or electricity. We're looking more at those high tech devices, would be more in
Right.
this definition of the Iris and
Right.
within this
Like,
document.
the high
The high
tech
tech.
is like the interactive flat panels on
Sure.
an adjustable mount with a sound bar and a sip and puff input device attached to it, right? Like that's like the crown royale of like the ultimate like device trifecta, right? Stuff that would, be considered adaptive, like adjusting, their writing skills or so things like that that are more traditional IT supported. Like, you need like an IT director to go, yo, this is okay on the network and we'll authorize it, right? Like something like that is definitely within the sphere of ed tech or the traditional sphere of ed tech. And we've sort of changed the definition over the years, right? Like when, prior to like Bree and myself coming into our roles, the ed tech office was very much supporting school districts around traditional IT stuff, right? And less around the ed tech stuff. And then now even more seeing the tech stuff as being, it's not just, the infrastructure stuff. It's the
Right.
learning stuff that has now
Yeah.
been umbrellaed underneath us, right?
You know
Well,
what
and it
has
just
not changed over time is the definition of what assistive technology is. So
exactly.
what might be available for funding through that grant, adaptive and inclusive tech, may be different, but assistive technology, Sharon, remind us how that definition stayed stable.
Right. So assistive technology is going to be like at its core, right? We can go through and read the what's in IDEA, but at its core, it is the tool that person must have in order to access their environment. So they must have that, or they're unable to access the classroom. They're unable to access communication. They're unable to access, where a wiggle seat becomes an assistive technology tool is if that student needs it in order to stay in the classroom and to be able to access their general education curriculum. Otherwise, they're up and out of the classroom, right? So that is like really at its core, that assistive technology, when you're making those decisions, that's kind of really where we're at. And I can pull up the IDEA definition of any device or service and, all of
I think
that.
we could send that out after so
Yeah.
that we make sure we kind of keep going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the point here, oh, Irene, go ahead.
I was going to say I don't know if this is correct or not, but I have led my paras to understand that bringing a pull-up and the wipes to a student is an assistive. I mean, not assistive tech, obviously, but can be. It's a low, But am I thinking of that wrong? Because like that's telling them what we're doing next. It's a more concrete way of letting them know instead of just saying we're going to go potty and grabbing their hands and taking them and they're not understanding what you're doing. So am I thinking of that incorrectly?
One thing Irene said that perked up my ears about assistive technology is an object or visual schedule
Yeah, I
is
have
assistive
those too.
technology. So you may be determining certain objects to help that student transition through their day. For some kids, it's a visual and they move about the building because they see the triangle at different spots, or they know this means I'm going here. And you're talking about a functional object, like, hey,
Gotcha.
if we're passing them this, they know it's time to transition.
I
It's kind of this,
misunderstood.
it's kind of the same as the visual schedule, but it's more concrete of an
It's the
item
concrete stuff. Got you.
instead of the
I
picture
was
of, yeah.
I was thinking you were asking if a diaper was an assistive technology tool, but using it as a communication or is it a concrete object within their schedule? Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Kristen. Someone else had a hand up, but then
Oh, I had
believe
my hand up, sorry.
I
So my thinking is maybe there's a line that we could draw between assistive tech for everyday living versus assistive tech to accessing curriculum and the learning environment, right? Where, yeah, I think that was pretty much. Sorry, I was trying to come up with, but like for example, like I had a district see if they wanted to use like automatic door openers on my grant, and I'm like, yes, that's more of an ADA compliance thing, right? Like that's not really what my grant was
yeah,
intended for, right? Like
that's
that's just something you should have to be in ADA compliance, not this is something that's going to close achievement gaps, right?
hmm hmm yeah, it- for sure.
so
Absolutely.
one of the things I was wanting to talk about was that that myth might be exactly why our grant is the way it is, though. It might be that in the legislature's mind, it's about technology, right? If it's going to be an assistive technology, and that might be exactly what it is, because our supervisor always says, well, we have to go with the legislative intent of the language of the grant, right? In this case, it's only that technology that's assistive is going to be covered. So it might be exactly for that reason, though. So
That's a really good point, Anna. So look, we're just hitting educators and parents with this myth and facts document, but really look at how that could be so important for our legislatures to be able to really have a better understanding of what assistive technology is, because they have a different viewpoint of that it has to be a high-tech device or something.
And
So
I can second that my interactions with folks outside of education, it's a completely different world. Like it's like I met someone who did accessibility for the corporate world, and like she didn't know anything of what I was talking about, right? It was like two different universes. And I was like, how are you not using these things in the corporate world, right? Like um so it's definitely like very siloed of sorts, like in
mhm,
how we operate, and not just in accessibility, but just like in general.
yeah.
This speaks
We're
to, oh,
we're in
sorry,
our own little
Casey.
bubble. But anyway, I just sometimes I do feel like education is its own in its own little bubble, and then we have bubbles within bubbles.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think our conversation here speaks to why we pulled out these myths as kind of knowledge building, because it's like, what do these terms mean? In what context? How is everybody interpreting this? So this is a great conversation. I thought
Yeah.
we'd head on to myth 12, an AT device and service that works for one child will work for all children. And the fact being AT devices and services need to be responsive to a child's individual needs.
Yeah, so that explanation is that there's a range of those assistive technology options. We're going to go with within this document of what high tech and low tech is. And we need to consider what's appropriate for that special education or related service, supplementary aids and services, which were really within that IEP. And that IEP team really has to have that base knowledge, right? They need to possess that knowledge about the child's, not just the child's IEP, their child's needs and abilities, but also what goes into that IEP, so that it needs to contain that information about how the child's disability affects the child's involvement in progress towards, right, making progress towards that general education curriculum, right, which is the curriculum used by non-disabled peers. And if the IEP determines that AT service devices and services are necessary for a child, one or more of the members of the IEP team needs to be knowledgeable. And that's what these, most of these are we're talking about tonight, right? And so, and knowledgeable means that they need to have at least a working knowledge of what those AT options are or solutions that might support that child in meeting those goals and objectives and making meaningful progress towards their curriculum. So we really, that's where having our LEAs, having our technical assistance providers, our professionals, like really having an understanding of these supports. So our guiding questions for this myth. So what is a tool does a tool or tech become assistive technology? And we've talked a little bit about that. But So it would be nice if you think about a student, right, and how this myth or fact applies, and why is a one-size-fit-all approach problematic?
Was it in here that we were talking about this, as well as like what that a student might not want to use a certain device or a method as well? And so for whatever reason it's not something that they desire to do. Something else would be more effective for them because of their interest in using the tool or not.
Yeah, I think that, we talked about that myth last time that, it's definitely something that we need to look as to the reason why that child is having a difficult time utilizing a tool that the team is thinking that this would be really great. We always want to start with the input of the child, and is there a reason? I just met with a team this afternoon, and middle schoolers, they just don't want to look different than anybody else, right? However, our children are this child, as all children, need to access their curriculum. So just because they don't want to go to math class, well, they still need to learn these. Like, there are some things that we as adults need to help them get to that point of utilizing those tools. So yeah, but the one size fit all approach, like, can you think of some things that might have that?
I was thinking when districts decide that, hey, we're all going to use a certain AAC app.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to use that, when that's really something that needs to be, best practice is to trial 3 different kinds and choose one that works best for that child. So there's other, this brings up supportive technology again versus assistive technology. Yes, there are some communication supports. Casey mentioned the communication boards in the playground and across the school environment. Sometimes AAC apps are used as a support, or those other, speech to text and
Mhm.
text to speech, all of that. But when a student, again, is needing the assistive technology to, again, access curriculum, make progress, then it needs to be responsive to the child's individual needs. That makes it assistive technology.
Yeah, there's a lot of, discussions within the AAC field, even just speaking of AAC, between that tier one, tier two, tier three, like tier one, whole district has a certain AAC system, and there's some rationales behind that. And then, but however, when it looks at that one size fit all, like, if that mean that that's not going to work, we know that our population, not everything works, right? So we need to make that individualized.
And the intention for some districts are actually, if we choose one app, then everybody's going to learn to use it, and we're going to build capacity, and the staff is actually going to have greater follow through. So it's like not out of I don't
Yeah,
want to buy what the student
right.
needs. Sometimes it's
Exactly.
decisions that would build capacity. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's within that kind of tier one, the reasoning behind it. And thanks for explaining that a little bit better. Yeah, it really, but for this, we really kind of need.
I think also their word that the in the elephant in the room is also gatekeeping.
Well, and this is the wonderful thing about an IEP, is that when it's decided by the team that an assistive technology tool is needed in order to access and make progress toward the general education and IEP goals and objectives, then that gets written into the IEP. And so regardless of the rules, or regardless of the IT procedures, regardless of that, that document, that federal document, goes above and beyond and provides protections for that student, because they need that. The team has decided that that is the tool that the student needs in order to access the environment, and they would be denied FAPE. They would be denied a free and appropriate public education, which goes against IDEA, and that would be a problem. So So yeah, just understanding and having that knowledge of how that works within the IEP can be really powerful.
Funny thing, my speech therapist came in just a little bit ago and said, no longer can we put in IEPs that a student is going to use an AAC device, and it's not going to be just for them. It has to be an AAC device that is for everybody in the class, not an individual.
You might want to talk to Sharon afterwards.
I was quite surprised because I said, I have 3 AAC devices I use with all of my students. But she said, oh, you can do that, but you can't say that a student is going to use or need this specific AAC device in your classroom at all. in
So-
their
I've heard a district or two say that similar thing to me, that they're reluctant to tie specific devices to students because then they're obligated to have or provide those devices.
Yeah, and so there's a conversation, a bigger conversation within this. So the working understanding, for lack of a better word, around that issue is the idea of, well, if this student goes from one district to another and they don't have that specific tool. So, an example might be a specific, speech to text tool, and they just have a different system. If you put that exact name in there, then they're tied to that. So usually what happens is that we want to be in what had been the working knowledge base is that we provide a description of the tool that needs to happen. However, when it comes to, and we've done that with AAC as well, and I believe that when we have, and we're in the beginnings and we're looking at an AAC apps and we're trying to figure out which tool is the best, having that general information is great. However, we're now at the point that if we have a child and this is their communication, this is their voice, and they have been using this for 5 years, it just really doesn't matter. It needs to be put in. So, so that child, when they go to the different district, it just means that, yeah, they're going to have to decide that. Now, that is with understanding that assistive technology tool, again, has to provide access and make progress towards, right? The team has to make that decision towards the general education environment and IEP goals. So it needs to be written across the IEP that tool is how this student accesses their communication and their educational environment. So it's pretty important to have a robust conversation within that. And it also is, I think, very important that we need to write the what the descriptions are, right? The features that the student really actually needs. So
I'm writing in the notes that document the features that the student needs versus the exact device, unless, what's a short way to say this?
I would say unless that is the student's established and preferred method of communication.
So you're speaking specifically about AAC communication devices is often one of those ones where it's like, no, anything doesn't go. They've spent 3 years
Yep.
learning how to communicate with this device. We're not
Yeah.
going to change that up on them.
And
All
there
right.
and the apps are so different. So if I'm going to use a semantic compaction type AAC, such as Unity or LAMP, and I am used to that system of communication through semantic compaction, then moving me to a different system that is more of a folder type system that is going to be detrimental to me. Like, this is my communication style. So so that is, and if I've been using that for years and I know how to do that, and because it wasn't written into the IEP, and I go to a different district and they're like, well, yes, but we only use pro quo, that's going to be, that is not the intent of the law. That's not the intent of IDEA or within this myth.
All
Can I
right. So,
Can
oh,
I
go
share
ahead, please.
something to add
Yes,
to what
please
Sharon
do.
has said? I'm sorry, I was driving and I couldn't, I
Sure.
was trying to stop so I can kind of share.
Yeah.
So I am a teacher for the blind, and one thing we've encountered is districts are having us now include in our IEP goals because say they're a Chrome district. So we're having to include like Chromebook versus iOS. So we're supposed to do both of these devices because of that reason, Sharon. If the student moves and the district is not a Chromebook friendly district or is not an Apple friendly district, then
Yeah.
we can go either way. But typically, if a student is used to, like voiceover, for example, using their iPads, that's something that we stick to. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of neat what you just said. It's like that's exactly kind of what we're doing in our world over here.
Yeah, I mean, if there's something that can be used from one system to another, and that just really, it doesn't matter. Having the features of that system is more important, like what they need to use rather than the actual thing. But however, when they've been using it for so long and that feature is ingrained into their learning, and taking it away is going to be a detriment to them in order for them to not be able to have a free and appropriate public education, not be able to access FAPE, then I think it's a different conversation. So,
Correct.
Right. Because when I think about using VoiceOver on iOS, which that's when the screen is speaking to you what's on the screen for those who don't know VoiceOver. And Annabelle, you could probably give a better explanation. But using that on iOS versus hopping over to Chrome, we're not going to just do that smoothly. There's a lot of learning that goes on, right?
Oh yeah,
right.
completely two separate programs versus Chromevox when you use Chromebook, and then an Apple product is VoiceOver. They're so different commands and everything. So anyway, we had to deal with that too. And so when a student has had it and knows the commands for that VoiceOver, it the districts usually typically just purchase it because they've used it for years. And so that's their form of communicating and accessing.
Yeah, I think it's a different conversation when it's the beginning of that, right? Of that, using that tool for access. But when it's established and it is the preferred method and learned method, I mean, our students already have such a hard time, right? They have pretty significant disabilities and so to be able to just rip that out and just change that, just yeah, that can cause harm and cause issues with, again, I just come back to accessing a free and a public education. So there's interpretation and squish in there, but I think cooler heads and having a conversation can prevail.
So myth 13, we've touched on, right? Accessible technology and AT are the same thing? Nope, they are not. So accessible technology and AT are not the same thing. Accessible technology is a term used to describe technology that is designed in a way to support many different learners or users, while assistive technology is a term that describes a piece of technology that is selected to perform a specific task for an individual child with a disability. There is a great video if you feel like you or those around you need a better understanding of accessible technology or inclusive technology or supportive technology. It has different terms, right? Supportive technology, inclusive technology, and accessible technology. The site's Center for Inclusive Technology in Education. Is that what it stands for?
I think so. I think
I
you're
should
good.
know
I
this.
think
It
you're
should roll
close.
off the tongue, but they did a great video that I want to say it's 3 to 5 minutes explaining the terms and defining what AT, assistive technology, is in comparison to accessible tech. Anybody want to weigh in on this one?
So I have a student who is in a wheelchair. So I would say that is a accessible technology for her to be able to access getting into class and going out to recess and all those things. But an assistive technology, well, it could still be.
So that would
I
be
mean,
an
that could be
assistive
both.
technology. A wheelchair would be an assistive technology because that particular student really needs that to perform a specific task. Other students may need a wheelchair, and that's for their assistive technology. Sometimes wheelchairs are called adaptive technology, but that falls under assistive technology in this case.
So accessible would mean a wheelchair wouldn't be that because she would need like the ramp to use the wheelchair would be the accessible
So,
technology.
Sharon, you can poke holes in this theory, but you know the carts that are at the grocery store, the little drive-in carts, that's sitting there. Someone might come and need it that day, and that makes the grocery store accessible to them, and that's available to everyone. Versus a customized wheelchair that student has drives in a certain way. You know, it's developed and purchased for them to use. So I mean, that's why sometimes it feels like splitting hairs, but when it's individualized like that, that's
Mhm.
assistive technology.
Yeah.
Would
And I probably should I put a little caveat that my opinions are my own and not the opinions of, and should not be used for legal reasons.
oh
So
yeah,
nobody come
right.
after me for like, well, Sharon Redmond said. So,
Well,
um,
that's interesting, Sharon. So like I went to the immediate care recently, and my daughter injured, so she couldn't walk very well. So they had the wheelchairs there, but that in that case they would be accessible technology because they were a general wheelchair, right? So I guess the kind of the
So
difference, or
if your child went to school and for a certain amount of time needed that technology to get around from class to class, and she might have a 504 plan that lists, hey, we need this assistive technology specifically for her during this period of time for her to access her classes.
because I thought it
Um,
could be the same, like a wheelchair in one situation might be an
that's it.
accessible
That's exactly
technology,
it.
and in another situation is assistive.
Yes, totally.
Okay.
The same
Okay.
piece of equipment, you said it
Yeah.
perfectly,
And a
could
different thing
be,
in a different,
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think of it also like our phones. Like our phones now have speech to text. Everybody uses it for texting, right? You just talk into it, and that's accessible to everybody. We all have access to that. So, but it becomes an assistive technology when it's the only way you have access to be able to send the message, right? It's the only way you can access through. So thinking about that, like it's so personalized, and could you do it without that? No, then it becomes an assistive technology. And so, like what Kristen was saying, when you're at school and you need that for a certain amount of time, it becomes an assistive technology. Like I had a student, oh gosh, this was way back in the 90s. No, it was the early 2000s. It wasn't that far back. It's way back. He had broken both arms in a football game, and he was in all of his AP classes. So he could no longer write. So I had to set up, right, for him some speech to text to use. And so that then became assistive technology. Anybody could probably have used it, but he now needed it in order to access his curriculum. So
Another thing I can think of, and I don't know if this is right or not, but a lot of the times we use what's called Bookshare to access books, audiobooks and large print books for our students. But I've noticed that many districts now all over use Epic, and that's the Epic app and or Epic in general. And it's kind of neat because we can access also audiobooks and we can enlarge those same books, and they're so animated and fun, and our students actually choose Epic over like Bookshare, for example. So I don't know if that would be an example of the accessible technology because all the kids have access to it, but we use it to our advantage. with certain things. So anyway,
Good
I just thought
example.
of that.
I think it's an example of what's happened. It's just how technology has evolved, right? Bookshare came out of the need for our students, like your students, Annabelle, to be able to access,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Large print, audio, because there wasn't anything, right? Now, so many companies offer that, and then large print, they're making them accessible, have accessibility features in them. So it's an interesting, the lines used to be clearer, right? I think they used to be much clearer. And now with how technology has moved forward, they kind of shift a little bit, but they need that in order to make progress towards and access their environment. That's kind of that's our defining line.
So myth 14, assistive technology, universal design for learning, and accessible education material are the same thing. Now, Annabelle could fill the hour talking about accessible educational material, I'm sure, because that's when curriculum is not always accessible. But this myth, if you go to the myths and facts document, they give the definitions for each of these things very clearly.